Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing your smartphone, laptop, or even your smart TV is nowhere to be found. Stores are empty, websites are out of stock, and shipping updates give you nothing but delays. This isn't science fiction. What you're witnessing is the fragile state of the global supply chain, a system designed for efficiency, not resilience. The world depends on a complex network of factories, ports, and logistics hubs, all synchronized like a giant clock. A single disruption in one part of this machine can create a cascade of shortages across continents. Recent trade disputes, port closures, and international sanctions have pushed this system to its limits. Factories in Asia cannot ship parts fast enough. Shipping containers are stuck in ports. Critical components are delayed or unavailable. The media may tell you this is just a temporary shortage or focus on politicians pointing fingers, but the real story is deeper. It's about how the global supply chain is structured to minimize cost, not risk. Consumers rarely see the machinery behind the gadgets they rely on. Each product is built from hundreds, sometimes thousands, of individual parts sourced from different countries. Semiconductors from Taiwan, casings from China, assembly in Vietnam, software from the US, and all of these pieces must arrive on time. When one fails, the ripple effect is immediate. Phones are delayed, laptops are sold out, and electronics prices spike. This isn't a minor inconvenience. It's a wake-up call about how intertwined and vulnerable our everyday lives are to global economic pressures. And the key to understanding this crisis is realizing that it's not just about trade policies or politics. It's about structural fragility, inefficiency disguised as efficiency, and a system designed to collapse under stress. At first glance, supply chains seem straightforward. Raw materials are mined or harvested, components are manufactured, goods are assembled, and then products are shipped to distributors and retailers. But in reality, they are a web of interdependent operations, stretching across multiple continents, time zones, and legal systems. Take a smartphone, for example. Its processor might come from Taiwan, its memory from South Korea, its display from Japan, and its assembly in China. Each of these components is transported via sea freight or air cargo, passing through ports, customs inspections, and warehouses. Any bottleneck along the way delays the final product. Companies optimize for cost at every step. Factories operate just-in-time production, meaning parts arrive only when needed to minimize storage costs. This reduces expenses but leaves almost no buffer if shipments are delayed. Containers may be stuck in ports due to labor disputes, weather, or political restrictions. Even minor disruptions, like a shortage of plastic casings or a delayed chip shipment, can halt entire production lines. It's not just tech. Automobiles, appliances, and even household goods rely on similar networks. The more complex the product, the more fragile the chain. And because companies compete on price, they often pick the cheapest suppliers and logistics routes, ignoring risk. That's why a single trade dispute or factory shutdown can halt production globally. Understanding this framework is key. It's not a conspiracy or accident. It's the natural consequence of a system optimized for cost, speed, and profit rather than resilience. Trade disruptions are the spark that lights this powder keg. Tariffs, sanctions, port strikes, and political disagreements can stop shipments overnight. For example, if a country imposes a tariff on imported electronic components, manufacturers may delay shipments or reroute them to other countries, slowing down production. Ports themselves are vulnerable. Congestion in Los Angeles or Shanghai can delay thousands of containers. Labor strikes, COVID lockdowns, and bureaucratic delays can all paralyze a system designed for speed. Even small changes in policy, like a new inspection requirement or environmental regulation, can cause weeks of backlog. The problem is compounded by global reliance on single sources. Critical components like semiconductors or lithium-ion batteries are concentrated in a few countries. If production halts in Taiwan or South Korea, the effects are felt worldwide. Companies rarely stockpile these materials because of cost, leaving them exposed. Consumers see only the result: delayed shipments, empty shelves, and rising prices. Businesses scramble to find alternatives, but options are limited. The headlines may focus on political blame, but the underlying cause is structural, a system designed for efficiency over redundancy. Many corporations are aware of these risks, but have chosen cost efficiency over safety. Just-in-time inventory systems save billions, but leave no margin for error. Companies rely on predictive algorithms, historical patterns, and supplier assurances, but these are powerless against sudden disruptions. Some corporations diversify suppliers, spreading risk across multiple regions. Others attempt to stockpile critical parts, but even the largest companies can't fully insulate themselves from geopolitical shocks or natural disasters. Trade wars, port closures, or sudden policy changes expose gaps in their planning. The tension between cost and resilience drives corporate behavior. Stockpiling or diversifying suppliers is expensive. Delays are cheaper until they aren't. When a shortage hits, companies face not just lost revenue, but reputational damage, legal liability, and cascading supply failures that ripple through the economy. This approach explains why consumers often experience sudden shortages. The companies closest to you were unprepared for shocks they assumed wouldn't happen. When they do, the system collapses in real time, leaving individuals and businesses scrambling. Not all regions are equally vulnerable when it comes to global supply chains. Certain geographic areas act as critical nodes in the worldwide production network. East Asia dominates electronics manufacturing, Southeast Asia controls textile and apparel production, and South America supplies essential raw materials like lithium, copper, and soy. These regions have outsized influence because they host specialized factories, skilled labor, and infrastructure tailored to their industries. The problem is that these regions are also exposed to natural disasters, political instability, and infrastructure bottlenecks. A typhoon in Taiwan, for example, can shut down semiconductor factories that supply chips for phones, cars, and medical equipment worldwide. A flood in Thailand can halt production of hard drives, displays, and industrial components. Even minor incidents like a port closure in Indonesia or a labor strike in Malaysia can ripple across the globe, delaying shipments and creating shortages far away from the actual disruption. This geographic concentration creates systemic fragility. High dependence on a small number of countries reduces bargaining power, giving those regions leverage in negotiations and increasing the risk that a single event can trigger a global chain reaction. Companies that rely on one key supplier or a single region for raw materials are vulnerable to cascading delays that can take months to recover from. Consumers often feel the effects most acutely in countries far from the source. Electronics, vehicles, household goods, and even food products suddenly become scarce or more expensive. Retail shelves can empty faster than stores can restock. The economic shock is compounded because governments and corporations cannot instantly create alternative production centers. Factories take years to build, supply chains take months to reroute, and skilled labor cannot be created overnight. The environmental and political context further complicates geographic vulnerabilities. Many critical regions are prone to climate change-related disasters such as floods, typhoons, and droughts. Political instability, trade disputes, and regulatory changes can also abruptly disrupt operations. Countries with weaker governance may not enforce labor or safety regulations consistently, creating hidden risks that can cascade when global demand spikes unexpectedly. This geographic fragility highlights a fundamental tension in modern economies. Efficiency versus resilience. Global systems are optimized for cost, speed, and specialization rather than redundancy or risk mitigation. The cheapest supplier is often chosen over the most reliable, and production is concentrated where costs are lowest, not where resilience is strongest. This design makes billions of consumers dependent on a handful of critical nodes, and when something goes wrong, there is no safety net. The lesson is clear. Geographic concentration makes global supply chains inherently fragile. A single disruption in a high-impact region can echo worldwide, causing delays, price spikes, and shortages that directly affect daily life. Understanding this hidden vulnerability is the first step in preparing for future shocks. Companies, governments, and individuals need to recognize that cost efficiency is not free. It carries the hidden cost of exposure, and those costs can hit everyone at once. For the average person, global supply chain disruptions manifest as higher prices, longer waiting times, and pervasive uncertainty. Electronics may not arrive when expected. Energy bills fluctuate due to shortages in components for energy production or distribution. Even everyday groceries can be affected if packaging, refrigeration, or shipping equipment is delayed. These problems may seem disconnected from daily life, but they are the visible symptoms of a deeply interlinked system struggling to function. Consider the electronics market. A delayed shipment of a microchip affects smartphone assembly. A laptop order that was promised in 2 days can now take weeks. E-commerce platforms report stockouts, frustrating customers and creating panic buying. Consumers respond in ways that compound the problem, buying alternative brands, hoarding supplies, or delaying other purchases, which in turn disrupts demand forecasting for companies. Households feel the indirect costs as well. Inflation spikes, discretionary spending declines, and financial uncertainty grows. Families postpone major purchases, from cars to home appliances, because prices are unpredictable or products are unavailable. Service-based industries also feel the impact. Repair services, installation companies, and tech support see surges in demand when delays cause bottlenecks in delivery and maintenance. The food industry is particularly sensitive. Tariffs, export restrictions, or supply delays affect farmers' ability to sell crops. If a country suddenly imposes import duties on soybeans, wheat, or coffee, producers face reduced demand and local prices fluctuate. Grocery stores may struggle to stock shelves, forcing consumers to adjust buying habits or switch to alternatives. These micro-level adjustments ripple through the entire economy, slowing growth and creating feedback loops of uncertainty and disruption. The emotional and psychological impact on consumers is also profound. Supply chain failures create a sense of helplessness. People feel disconnected from the mechanisms controlling the products they rely on, which can erode trust in governments, corporations, and markets. The perception of scarcity increases anxiety, amplifying social and economic stress. Global interdependence ensures that no one is truly insulated. A port strike in Asia, a flood in Europe, or a labor dispute in the U.S. has consequences thousands of miles away. This interconnectedness magnifies the impact on consumers, making everyday life vulnerable to decisions and disruptions beyond their control. Ultimately, the consumer experience is the front line of supply chain fragility. Shortages, price spikes, and delays are not random. They are the inevitable outcome of a system optimized for efficiency rather than resilience. Recognizing this is crucial for both individuals and policymakers. The next time your electronics are delayed or grocery prices rise, remember, these are not isolated events, but part of a global pattern of vulnerability. When trade disruptions hit, media coverage often emphasizes personalities, presidents, ministers, negotiators. Headlines focus on blame and diplomacy, painting a picture of conflict between two people or two nations. While politics is undeniably part of the story, The structural reality of supply chains is far more important and far more complex. Even rapid policy interventions cannot instantly solve logistical bottlenecks. A new trade agreement does not bring containers across a congested port any faster. It does not replace halted production lines or compensate for months of lost inventory. Policy is reactive, the supply chain is proactive, or in this case, painfully unprepared. Structural vulnerabilities such as just-in-time inventory, single-source suppliers, and global dependency create shock points. When disruptions occur, these vulnerabilities amplify the impact. Politicians may promise quick fixes or threaten retaliatory tariffs, but the underlying fragility remains. The system is designed to run at maximum efficiency with minimal redundancy, and that means recovery is slow when stress hits. Relying on political solutions alone can create the illusion of action while the structural reality worsens. Consumers see headlines about negotiations and tariffs, believing that everything will soon normalize, while in reality, delays, shortages, and cascading price increases continue to affect households and businesses. Moreover, structural fragility is not always obvious. Companies may hedge risk with contracts, alternative suppliers, or predictive analytics, but these measures cannot fully compensate for a global system stretched thin. Even the most sophisticated risk management strategies cannot overcome the vulnerabilities inherent in geography, infrastructure, and timing. Understanding the gap between political rhetoric and structural reality is essential. It explains why trade disputes or labor strikes can paralyze entire industries. Supply chains do not respond to words. They respond to movement, capacity, and production. Policies may address symptoms, but without systemic change, the next disruption will hit even harder. In short, focusing solely on politicians or trade deals misses the real story. Supply chain fragility is structural. It is built into the system, and it will continue to affect every consumer and business until governments, companies, and individuals recognize that efficiency without resilience is a ticking time bomb. Global supply chains are more than an economic network. They are an environmental and social force. Producing, shipping, and distributing goods creates ecological impact at every step. Manufacturing releases pollutants, shipping emits greenhouse gases, and warehouses consume energy on a massive scale. Environmental costs are often externalized, hidden from the final consumer, but they accumulate over time, contributing to climate change and resource depletion. Trade disruptions make these hidden costs visible. When shipments are delayed or rerouted, emissions can spike due to longer transport routes. Idle factories consume energy without producing goods. Ports congested with containers generate air pollution in nearby communities. This demonstrates that efficiency-driven globalization comes at a social and environmental price. Communities located near manufacturing hubs, ports, and distribution centers often face disproportionate burdens. Increased traffic, noise, pollution, and labor exploitation affect health and quality of life. Wealth disparities determine who bears the brunt. Low-income neighborhoods are more likely to host polluting facilities or receive hazardous materials, while affluent areas are insulated from direct exposure. Social consequences extend to workers as well. Factory shutdowns, delayed shipments, and financial uncertainty put laborers at risk of unemployment or wage reductions. Temporary layoffs, overwork, or unsafe working conditions can result when companies scramble to meet disrupted demand. Trade wars exacerbate these effects. When companies seek lower-cost inputs to maintain profit margins under tariffs or sanctions, they may turn to suppliers with weaker environmental or labor standards. This creates additional stress on ecosystems and communities, highlighting the hidden trade-offs of a globalized economy. Ultimately, understanding environmental and social dimensions reveals a crucial truth. Supply chain efficiency comes at a cost. Delays, disruptions, and trade disputes expose these costs to public scrutiny, forcing society to confront the true consequences of globalization. History provides a roadmap for understanding supply chain fragility. The 2008 financial crisis, the 2011 Japanese earthquake and tsunami, and the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic all highlight systemic vulnerabilities. In each case, efficiency-focused networks collapsed under stress, creating widespread economic and social disruption. Economists call these risks systemic because they arise from the interdependence of multiple actors rather than isolated failures. When a major node fails, like a port, factory, or financial institution, the effects cascade throughout the system, impacting industries, countries, and ultimately consumers. The lesson is consistent. Systems designed solely for efficiency are fragile. Profit-maximizing practices, lean inventories, and global concentration may reduce costs during normal operations, but they leave little room to absorb shocks. Resilience must be intentionally built. For corporations, this means diversifying suppliers, stockpiling essential materials, and investing in flexible manufacturing. Governments must recognize strategic vulnerabilities and build domestic capacity for critical goods. Citizens, meanwhile, must understand that global interdependence comes with real-world consequences that affect prices, availability, and social stability. History also shows the cost of ignoring these lessons. Rebuilding supply chains after disruption is expensive, slow, and often politically contentious. Proactive planning is cheaper, faster, and more effective than reacting to crises after they occur. The path forward requires coordinated action. Corporations must diversify suppliers, invest in redundancy, and maintain critical inventories. Governments must treat logistics, manufacturing, and critical infrastructure as strategic assets, ensuring that local capacity can support society during international disruptions. Consumers must recognize the interconnectedness of their choices, from electronics purchases to food consumption. Resilience is not free. It requires investment in infrastructure, workforce training, and technological innovation. But the alternative, continued reliance on fragile global networks, risks recurring shortages, price spikes, and economic instability. The current supply chain crisis is a wake-up call. It exposes not only political and trade vulnerabilities, but also the hidden fragility embedded in modern economies. How corporations, governments, and individuals respond now will determine whether the next shock is manageable or catastrophic. Building resilient systems involves more than planning for disasters. It requires redesigning supply chains for flexibility, prioritizing sustainability alongside efficiency, and acknowledging the social and environmental costs of globalization. Individuals can play a role by understanding that demand drives supply decisions, by supporting sustainable products, and by adjusting expectations in times of global disruption. Ultimately, efficiency without redundancy is fragility. The next supply chain shock is not a question of if, but when. The time to act is now, and the lesson is clear. Awareness, foresight, and resilience are the only ways to secure stability in a hyper-connected world.